everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how I draw this lion eye and fur in coloured pencil on Pastelmat. Now I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with Pastelmat over the years. I loved how vibrant and rich the colours looked, but I hated how grainy the pencils would layer on top, which was putting me off using it. Now I tend to start with the luminance pencils as a base and then I go over the top using polychromos. But through a bit of experimenting, I found that starting with a harder, drier pencil like the Polychromos or Pablo pencil actually works much better. Because the luminance pencils are softer and waxier, they tend to grip to the surface straight away, which can make blending more difficult. The harder, drier pencils create a much smoother initial layer, and then once that's down, you can go in with the luminance pencil afterwards. So here I'm getting those initial layers down in the iris with the Polychromos and Pablo pencils, working from light to dark and using a lighter pressure to begin with so we can get all those different tones in. I'm also leaving the reflection and pupil free for now until I've built up a bit of depth around the eye. I can see yellows, greens and burnt oranges, so I'm working my way up to the darker colours gradually, using a slightly heavier pressure around the edge and taking the pressure off as I shade into the iris. I like to use circular motions when shading in the eye, as it helps to blend the colour more smoothly and doesn't leave any visible pencil strokes. I tend to go back and forth between adding the darker pencils and using the lighter pencils to blend. Now the pupil and the area around the eye appears black, but if you look closely, the pupil and lower lid area is more of a deep blue tone. So I'm using the dark indigo pencil here, and then I switch to a dark warm grey for the upper lid. Before I add any white to the reflection, I like to layer down a light layer of blue first, and then I go in with a slightly deeper blue around the pupil, making sure I've got all those different tones in, and then it's only towards the end that I'll use the white pencil to pick out the highlights and bring the shine back into it. Once I've got a lot of the layers down, I like to go in and use a black pencil around the edges of the eye, just neatening everything up and refining the shape of the eye and pupil. Then using the white Museum Aquarelle, I'm picking out those brighter highlights in the reflection. This pencil is perfect for this, as it's a super pigmented white and it goes over multiple layers of pencil really well. I'm making sure all those subtle tonal shifts are in place within the iris, so here I'm focusing on the transition from the orange outer edge into the yellow and then into the green tones within the iris. I really want to keep that warmth in the eye so it doesn't lose its depth or vibrancy. And then I'm just refining any details before moving on to the fur. For the fur, I like to start by mapping out the very darkest areas first. This helps me to see clearly where those lighter and darker areas are, and then I don't lose sight of them as I build the base layers up. The fur has a mix of warm and cool tones, with some areas more of a neutral beige tone and other areas more of a vibrant burnt orange. It doesn't really matter what order you add these different tones, as long as you build the layers up lightly. Now that I've got those initial layers down, I can introduce the luminance pencils. These layer much better onto the paper once we already have a couple of base layers underneath. And once you've got a smooth base and a lot of those tones built up, you can go in with a sharper pencil to start adding in more precise details. I usually like to come back to the eye once I've got the fur mapped out around it. It helps me to see what I need to add so I can go back in and refine it. I'm also adding those wispy lashes coming up over the top here. I repeat similar steps for the rest of the fur, mapping out the darkest areas first with a neutral grey pencil, making sure I've got all the warm and cool tones in the fur, going back and forth between blending and adding detail. For this section just below the eye, I'm using some light icy blue tones, as the fur is slightly cooler here and I want to bring that out. For the lighter details, I'm using the white Polychromos pencil, as I wanted to keep them subtle, and the Polychromos isn't quite as pigmented as the other whites. I also make sure to really brighten the areas where the sunlight is hitting by layering warm golden yellows and oranges. Don't be afraid of using more vibrant colours here, as this is what really brings the drawing to life. I add in those darker wispy eyebrow hairs once most of the layering is complete. I prefer to leave these until the end so they don't get smudged when I'm working around them and adding in those lighter details. Towards the end, I like to look at my drawing and the reference photos side by side on my laptop, so I can clearly see if there's any tones or details that I'm missing. It's easy to get lost in all the little details when you're looking close up at the photo, but taking a step back and looking at it from a distance really helps to see what still needs adjusting. I really hope you've enjoyed this short time-lapse tutorial. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. The full real-time tutorial of the lion eye and fur is available on Patreon, along with lots of other tutorials if you'd like to join me over on there. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.